Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. Well, I know I just made a video, and I was discussing not only my podcast, first episode, which will be on Tuesday, July 28th at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which I encourage everyone to check out. I'll have the link below, and you can post questions preemptively to the discussion that I'll be having with Wayman29. But in that video, I also talked about the back and forth between Peter, aka Essence of Thought, which is his YouTube channel, and IERA, Hamza Zortz's, his colleague Imran, and their videos on their Mission Dawa channel, and another channel which I forget the name, London Dawa something or other. And I made some observations where I said that even though I do not share Peter's worldview, i.e., I am not an atheist, but he is, I can still appreciate a good back and forth debate. Could pop some popcorn, kick back, and enjoy some good intellectual stimulation of conversation. I also can appreciate when someone has done a good job refuting or calling into question someone's argumentation, regardless of what their background is. Now, I'm responding to the video done by Hamza and Imran of IERA. Their video is called GDM Vlog. Peter Thurston, apologize, stop misrepresenting, and pay us a visit. Smiley face. Now, I want to say at the very beginning here that Peter does not know that I'm making this video. He did not ask me to make this video. He has no knowledge that I am making this video. No one knew I was going to make this video. I'm not making this video to blindly defend Peter, as I will make very clear in a moment where I think Peter obviously was incorrect to call Hamza a liar, specifically. But I am not trying to be an apologist for Peter or his position, nor am I trying to defend or attack Hamza and IERA. But I will explain where I think Hamza, in his most recent video, has maybe gotten some things mixed up, and where I'd like to call some things into question myself. Now, some of you might be asking, well, okay, if I'm not doing this because Peter asked me to, why am I even bothering with this video when no doubt Peter will make a response to this video? Why am I jumping the gun before Peter has done anything? Well, I'm doing this because Hamza has essentially entered a particular area that I am no way in saying I'm an expert, but it's something that I am very passionate about. I certainly consider myself a student when it comes to this particular topic, but they are now entering the realm of the psychology of religion, or the psychological approach to studying religion. This is something which I am very passionate about. When I was an undergrad and I received my bachelor's in psychology, my point of interest and research specifically was done on not only doing empirical research and trying to test some of Carl Jung's theories empirically, but I was also interested in the psychology of religion. I also, most of my papers and research were done on the subject. Now that I'm a graduate student working on obtaining my master's in counseling, psychotherapy, most of my research and discussion has been on the role that religion and spirituality plays in a counseling or psychotherapeutic mental health context. I have documented for many years that I'm a huge Carl Jung nerd. In fact, here is my bookcase. This is all Carl Jung, okay, in Jungian psychology, and also, well, I should say Freud's up there as well. So psychoanalysis, or Jung, and particularly the approach to the psychology of religion, has been my bread and butter since 2008, give or take. And so, since Hamza has entered into my playing field, I felt like I needed to respond to this, since the main focus of this video is on this research article that he presents. I'm not really interested in him trying to get Peter to say sorry or to apologize, because that's Peter's business. What I will say, though, is do I think that Hamza is a liar? No. What I will say is that I think that Hamza did a terrible job of giving his audience, when he was lecturing to these young Muslims, as he calls them, these students at a university, in that video recording of his lecture, of his presentation to these students, he did not give the correct reference to his source. He mentioned the right author. The right author is Dr. Oliveira Petrovich. That is the right author. But he then goes on to say the Journal of Psychology of Religion. The article was not published in the Journal of Psychology of Religion. He does not give the title of the article in question, and he doesn't even quote it verbatim. He kind of gives his little spin summary of what he thinks the article is saying. That is not how you present your evidence. I myself have given a number of lectures, seminars, group discussions on the subject of Jungian psychology, on the psychology of religion, introduction to Carl Jung, and anytime I tell the students or anyone I'm talking to, the group I'm talking to, I either have the reference with me so I can show it to people during a break or afterwards during the Q&A, or I have it written down, and I have the reference written down. I make sure that there's no mystery about what I am referring to. And that is not what Hamza does in this particular lecture. He gives what I call a very vague reference to something that might exist. So when Peter went to go find this, he was using Hamza's assertion, his quote, his summary of what the article was saying, which is atheism is a learned psychological belief or position. He couldn't find anything that fit that exact descriptor. He did go to Oxford University's website and the professor's department, and he found, and you can see this on the screen, he actually came across the article that Hamza is actually talking about. But if you had just Googled what Hamza said, you would not have found this article. Okay? There would have been nothing to tell you that this was the article out of all the published things that this person has written. Okay? So that's the first problem. So again, I do think it was wrong to say that Hamza is a liar in this regard. But Hamza did not give the accurate information. For a person to fact check him, you would have to have gone into the article itself. Now, coming to the article, I've downloaded it, I've read it, I've jotted down some notes. In reading this article, which the title is Key Psychological Issues in the Study of Religion, published by, I believe it's a Siberian, I googled, it was hard for me to even find the journal which this came from, but I believe it's the Siberian Psychological Journal, dated 2007, the journal in question. And in reading it, I would not have come out of this, the way Hamza portrayed the article, what it was saying. First off, there's only mention of atheists and agnostics. There's no mention of atheism. Okay? Now, so I don't really think Hamza's conclusion, the way he is utilizing this article, is proper. I don't think so. And I will endeavor to explain why I think this. Now, I have some points to make, first about the article itself. I also have some points to make about Hamza's video. I'll start with the video. So I've already touched on 1 minute 10, 19 seconds, the apparent quote in the article mystery. Okay, I've already dealt with that. And also the fact that at minute 11:24, he kind of, is saying, oh, Peter tried to find the title, atheism in the title, and they talk about searching for titles. I listened to that clip that Hamza himself provides in this response video of his. I did not hear, and please, people can verify this for me, I did not hear Peter say he was doing a title search. He did a keyword search. Okay? He did a Google search, not a title search. So this whole segment of where Hamza's like, oh, if you looked at the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, you wouldn't see evolution in the title. No. That's not what Peter was doing. Okay, so let's, no. The next minute 9:01 second, he says the journal title is the Key Psychological Issues in the Study of Religion. I don't think so. That's not the name of the journal, from what I can tell. Looking at the APA format, The journal is, I can't even pronounce it, but again, when I Googled it, it appeared to be a Siberian publication. That's not the name of the journal. That's the name of the title of her particular contribution to this journal. Just wanted to point that out. Minute 9, second 48, he then says, from my understanding, quote unquote, and also minute 10, 11, my interpretation, meaning his interpretation of the article, he said what he said to the students about atheism as a learned concept. But then at minute 13:48, which I thought was really interesting, he says he emailed Dr. Petrovich, the author of this article, and basically says they asked about this point: is atheism a later learned psychological state? And she apparently wrote back and agreed that she's written on this, she's done research, that yes, it would appear that atheism is a later acquired psychological state, and he puts this quote, up on the screen. Interesting, because earlier he said, well, my interpretation of the article, and then he says, oh, but he turns to Imran, am I going to take my interpretation? Am I going to take your interpretation? No, I'm going to take her interpretation of her own work. And I, in fact, emailed her. So I'd be curious, did he email Dr. Petrovich before or after the lecture that was recorded, where he mentioned her article and the supposed quote? Because which one is it? Are you relying on your own interpretation? Because you say that in the video at minute 10:11 and minute 9:48. You say that. From my understanding, from my interpretation, but then at 13:48 you say you emailed for a clarification. So which one was first? Chicken or the egg? But regardless, if that's the case, regardless if that's what the professor is saying, regardless of that, congrats, you have a basis for your assertion. The thing, or at least it would appear so. Now let's turn to the article itself. I'm not going to go through the whole article. I may devote another video to this because I find it fascinating, and I really think that Professor Petrovich would benefit from a review of Jungian psychoanalysis on this regard, or analytical psychology with regards to the study of religion and psychology, because a lot of things that she says is very Jungian in its application. But I want to start with page 5. Now, something that's very interesting is the only part of the article that Hamza quotes in the video is the last paragraph, the beginning of the last paragraph on page 10. This is the possibility that some religious beliefs are universal. For example, basic belief in a non-anthropomorphic God as creator of the natural world seems to have a stronger empirical foundation that could be inferred from religious texts. Some of the initial findings of research into early religious understanding are consistent with other areas of developmental research, which suggest that there are cognitive universals in a number of domains of human knowledge. Okay. Now, the thing is, she's proposing in this video, by using psychology as a discipline, as a science, that it could benefit the study of religion. Particularly, her major themes are threefold, really. One, individuals and their beliefs, as opposed to huge groups. The second is that organic, spontaneous beliefs, as opposed to doctrinal or culturally transmitted beliefs from religious texts or dogmas. And third, the difference between, if we're going to say that some of these beliefs are universal from a cognitive perspective, your sample size would have to include people of various backgrounds, not just professing religious people. Okay? So she's not saying that this is a for sure fact. She's saying the possibility that some of these beliefs are universal, and she gives an example. Okay, so again, I want to point that out because I think that Hamza's usage of the usage of this article, I think he's missing her general point. But on page 5, I want to point out something that again is kind of an interesting statement that she makes. She is talking about research, religious scholars, and psychology. Okay. So then she says, this is like near the end of it, on page 5 of the PDF. It would be page 355 in the actual printed document. Yet, quote, yet the tendency to conflate the concept of something, i.e. mental state, and the concept's referent, i.e. the thing itself, has led to the view that religion can never be explained by psychological study. Thus, Eliades claimed that psychology, quote, misses the element of the sacred, end quote, whilst it is true that a religious concept refers to something non-empirical, i.e. wholly other, sacred, or God. The concept thereof is an empirical event, mental state in parentheses, and the conditions of its occurrence belongs in this world. Consequently, the empirical features of this concept are a matter for psychological research, whilst its ontological referent, transcendent realm, is manifestly not, but constitutes a topic normally pursued by theologians and other scholars of religion. End quote. Now I want to pause there for a moment. She is echoing Carl Jung's statement when he said that there is something called a God archetype, or the soul archetype, the psyche, the totality of the psyche, which he termed as being a concept where we experience spirituality or wonder or mystery or transcendence. But he never wanted to make an empirical validation or an empirical denial of metaphysical concepts. So she is echoing this concept that Jung established in his career, and is sort of echoed a little bit in Eliades, who was not a student, but a colleague of Jung, and took a lot of Jung's concepts and applied it to his study of religion, along with Joseph Campbell. So again, she is saying that the concept, in other words, the mental state, the idea, the formulation is empirical, but the concept itself, the actual thing of itself, is non-empirical. Okay? And she leaves it to the realm of theologians to talk about the ontological, transcendent realm, the reality of that. So I want to point that out, because I don't know if Hamza would agree with that. I don't know if, because he's utilizing this article, I don't know if he would be willing to actually say that he agrees with that. Another point that is made on page 7. Now, this goes back to the fact, again, the claim that, why it would have been hard for Peter to find this article by just doing a Google search, because atheism is never mentioned in the article, but she mentions atheists and agnostics. Now, what's the context? Again, she's talking about what would a sample size, how would you research the idea, the theory that that cognitive core beliefs include religious beliefs. She says on page 7 of the PDF document, which I will have linked in the more info section so you all can read it. She says here, a recent example that illustrates my point is the novelist Jim Crace, who was described by the Daily Telegraph in September 1999 as a dogmatic, unrelenting, and hard-nosed non-believer, yet admitted that he shared with religious individuals openness to transcendence and spiritualism. In order to find out if indeed most atheists and agnostics agree with religious believers on the basic idea of transcendence, we would need to examine a large section of the population in order to consider it representative of the diversity of views encompassed by Crace's assumption. Such a task is distinctly psychological, end quote, and she talks about data analysis and surveys, etc. Okay? So, she makes it very clear that it's not just professed believers. She's interested in what she says non-believers, which could mean anything. She doesn't qualify what non-believer says, but then in the next sentence she mentions atheists and agnostics, so we can assume that's what she's talking about. But I would say non-believer is a non-traditional believer, a non-subscribed member of an organized religion, a believer, right? So she includes non-believers in this category of research to see, are the core beliefs including belief in God. Okay, so I want to point that out. That might be another reason why Peter didn't find it, but also it's interesting that she's not just interested in the beliefs of believers, she wants to see whether this occurs organically for non-believers. On page 8, she again talks about people who abandon religion. She says on page 8, She says, in short, of all the disciplines involved in the study of religion, psychology alone is explicitly concerned with the conceptual development from childhood to adulthood and allows us to examine separately the spontaneous or natural component of religious thought and experience from the doctrinal or culturally transmitted one. I want to pause there for a moment. End quote. She makes a clear distinction between organic, spontaneous belief as a natural component of thought and experience, and she distinguishes this from doctrinal and culturally transmitted ones. This is very important because there is a distinct difference, okay? Quote, one way of achieving this is through cross-cultural research whereby we can arrive at theories that explain different aspects of human religious disposition. In addition to the question of how people acquire religious beliefs, psychology can contribute to a better understanding of why people abandon religious beliefs or replace them with alternative beliefs. Further, psychology can ask whether the same factors can cause similar changes in beliefs at all stages in individual development, whether the same factors are operational in all cultures, etc., etc., and she mentions Japan as an example, end quote. So again, this is quite interesting because she's not actually saying that, again, this article, she's not really making any huge claims here in this article. She's actually proposing where psychology could help with the study of religion, particularly the psychology of religion, based on individuals, okay? So she's talking about the whole gamut here. It's not just people who profess a belief in the numinous, but people who abandon religion, replace it with other things, across the whole spectrum of life. So, again, I'm wondering if Hamza would agree with some of the things that she's alluding to. On page 9, again, she alludes to the difference between doctrinal and organic beliefs. And this is very important because this wraps up into the paragraph that Hamza himself referenced, albeit out of context, but here's part of the context. She establishes 3, on page 8, she establishes, or is it page 8? Yes, actually beginning way the back on page 7, she says that by looking at all these different areas, cognitive as well as developmental psychology, looking at, historical, anthropological, sociological studies of religion, there are 3 areas that are fundamentally psychological. Number 1 is the origin of religion. Number 2 is the core concepts in religion, and the 3 is universality of religious beliefs. Let's skip on down to page, page 9, to look at when she specifically talks about number 2, which is the core religious beliefs, because these are the core cognitive beliefs, right? She says that the controversy regarding the existence of any core religious beliefs or concepts has been prominent in religious studies. Scholars from a variety of backgrounds have persuasively argued their particular stance on this issue, and opposing schools of thought have emerged. There is, however, a major difference in the understanding of what constitutes core religious concepts in religious studies on the one hand, and in psychology on the other. While scholars of religion debate whether or not there are any common doctrinal beliefs across different religious traditions, the current psychological view is that core or foundational concepts are those very basic conceptual categories that underpin our learning and knowledge acquisition in a particular domain. Examples of psychological core concepts include object, space, time, and quantity. Such concepts are thought to emerge spontaneously and early in development, are simple and likely to be found in all cultures, and she cites some scholars from 1998 about that. Moreover, core concepts are few in number, and psychologists have so far examined mainly those that occur in the physical domain. The issue whether any concepts or beliefs constitute a core component of religion itself is a researchable question, and as such ought to be verified empirically. The ongoing controversy regarding the existence of such concepts will continue as long as no distinction is made between religious beliefs of ordinary individuals, especially in the early development, and those beliefs that are recorded in religious and historical texts, usually a result of prolonged scholarly effort, end quote. And we could say, again, there's a difference between what I learn because of my upbringing, culturally transmitted, because religious scholars say, what a religious text says, and versus organic, spontaneous development. Okay, by my own reasoning, or through the course of my development. Having said that, let's skip on back down to page 10, because this gives you the wider context of the last paragraph, and I'll read it again, as Hamza said in the video himself. The possibility that some religious beliefs are universal, for example, basic belief in a non-anthropomorphic God as creator of the natural world, seems to have a stronger empirical foundation that could be inferred from religious texts. So what did she say? The possibility that some religious beliefs are universal seem to have a stronger empirical foundation than could be inferred from religious texts. Now, if I'm reading that correctly, and please, I would be willing to be corrected, based on what the other parts of the article, the greater context, this distinction, if it carries down to the last paragraph, which I'm assuming it does, is the difference between early spontaneous concepts of belief versus ones transmitted from doctrine and culture. Now, how do you... And she also distinguishes between reading religious texts and what is spontaneously acquired from psychology. Okay, so she says the possibility that some religious beliefs are universal seem to have a stronger empirical foundation that could be inferred from religious texts. So, and she's actually saying that there's a stronger, there's a possibility that beliefs are universal, seem to have a stronger empirical foundation that could be inferred from religious texts. Okay. Some of the initial findings of research into early religious understandings are consistent with other areas of developmental research, which suggests that there are cognitive universals in a number of domains of human knowledge. So again, outside of religious texts or doctrine, there seems to be there could be the possibility of a strong empirical assumption of core beliefs, okay, for religious beliefs, not due to texts or culture. Okay, I think that runs counter to what Hamza might be willing to admit. Search for invariance in human religious cognition requires data from children and adults alike, as well as comparisons from individuals from different cultures. Such evidence is relevant because it contributes towards establishing criteria of empirical conditions under which humans show a reliable tendency to think in terms of some basic religious categories, such as God or the transcendent, etc., etc. Okay. Now, again, I think that she's made enough points in this article that I would ask IERA and Hamza whether they would be willing to agree with everything she says in the article. Now, I know the classic response may be, well, just because I quote an article does not mean that I agree with everything the author says. Fair enough. But this, what I now suspect is that some quote mining has occurred here. Or at least, excuse me, if not quote mining, Hamza is launching from a statement that the author did not originally intend, or an interpretation of what the author did not originally intend, because this goes beyond just his discussion with Peter with regards to, or this even goes beyond, well, no, I mean, it does go beyond the discussion with Peter, but it really does go to Hamza utilizing this article to say that atheism is a learned, i.e. not natural mental state, and that the natural mental state is a religious one. He launches that into, from what I would think, he is trying to then say, so therefore, how he perceives what that means, what does religious belief mean, is a natural one. I would argue that because of her distinction between metaphysical claims and what we can psychologically know, and also the difference between doctrinal and culturally acquired beliefs versus natural organic ones, I don't think that she would agree with the way Hamza is potentially utilizing this article. Certainly, it's not giving any basis for belonging to an organized system. Rather, she is more interested in the organic and spontaneous beliefs that arise across the lifespan. But she's very much interested, I can tell, with children. But she also mentions adults at the conclusion of the article as well. But she also sees that across the lifespan, people change. People become non-believers. They change earlier beliefs and swap them for new ones. So she's not discounting that. In other words, I think for Hamza to say that it's a forced belief, and I know he kind of corrects himself in this response video from saying forced might be the wrong word, but if he's saying that religious belief is the natural one, then is he saying then that atheism is unnatural? But even if that were an argument, I would say that this article points to the type of belief that Hamza potentially believes or follows, accepts. The theology that he accepts, I don't think is being demonstrated, or there's a differentiation between that, a system of belief, theology, versus natural spontaneous spirituality, as the article seems to be implying. And I would ask, would Hamza agree with that? If not, then he's really just ignoring the vast majority of the article, and he's just trying to find someone who's saying, oh, well, in theory, a cognitive, there could be cognitive core beliefs that have to do with religious belief. That's really all he's looking for. And if that's the case, even in this article, she says that it's a possibility, that it could be suggested. But really what she's saying is more research needs to be done. And indeed, that's really the whole point of the field of psychology of religion. And again, one thing it cannot do, which if anyone reads this article, or if anyone is a fan of IERA, cannot make from this article, is to say that because, even if we say that it's a cognitive core belief, she's saying that psychology cannot do what most believers would like them to do, most traditional believers would like it to do, and back up metaphysical claims. It can't. And again, she's echoing Carl Jung, as I have mentioned earlier, in my opinion. She doesn't cite Jung, but pretty close. So thank you all for watching. Again, I hope this was clear, and sorry if I rambled, but I'll stop the video here now. And again, I look forward to seeing a response from Peter on this subject. And please feel free to follow me on Twitter, follow me on my blog, and Goodreads, and also my Google Plus if you'd like to follow me on there. And again, please check out my podcast, the first episode on July 28th, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And feel free to leave a question when you go to my Google Plus account. You can see all those links on the main page of my video. Thank you all for watching. Peace be with you all.